Hello there, Star Wars fans, and welcome back. Part 5 offered us a lot of answers to our burning questions. What's Reva's backstory? What happened to the Grand Inquisitor? And will we ever get to see that lovable Haja again? But this community's real question has been, where are the original Star Wars themes? My name is Derek, and this is Star Wars Music Analysis.
Do it.
If you ever watched my Book of Boba Fett breakdowns, then you might remember that it was in Chapter 5 that I started getting down on the music for not using the original themes, as so many visual Easter eggs were present. So, as we approached Part 5 of this series, filled with opportunities to hear legacy themes since the beginning of the show, I didn't hold out much hope that things would suddenly change. We start with a view of a familiar Coruscant that pans back to an Anakin Skywalker that clearly had a rough night. The music here reflects a more peaceful time during the Clone Wars, but before the fall of the Republic and the Great Jedi Purge, as Anakin and Obi-Wan spar. We then jump to what I assume is the Devastator and Vader looking out the viewport. Honestly, I couldn't even find undertones of his theme like I could in Part 3. This was Vader's episode of any so far, and his music was completely lacking. Instead, we just got this ominous underlying string music. There are some strong brass cues nonetheless, which have always been a sound that quickly brings us back to the sound of the original movies. For example, when Vader says launch the attack, we first hear the horns in parallel motion and then paired with the trumpets as they build to a transition, displaying the might and the power of the Imperial Empire. That is immediately juxtaposed with a very light OBI-WAN Kenobi theme that shows how weak and helpless these refugees are. As the Imperial forces arrive, the Inquisitor music begins, trying very much to sound like the original Imperial March, with powerful and quick attacks in the trumpets. The main Inquisitor theme comes fully in then as Reva arrives, similar to what we hear when Kylo Ren first arrives in The Force Awakens. As Reva and Kenobi talk, there's this moment where Kenobi says he wants the same thing, but then Reva immediately interrupts him and challenges that logic. Then we hear the first 3 notes of Kenobi's theme faintly in the horn, but then it stops, interrupting itself and falling back into the hazy texture. He's still questioning in this moment who he is, ideals he believes in, and what he's capable of. As the stormtroopers miss from point-blank range, we hear these powerful allusions in the brass to the original Imperial theme that I keep mentioning. In case you've missed it before, the intervals of a descending minor second that then returns to the first note and then ascends a minor third is the contour of melody that we've been listening for. It originally comes from the opening scene of A New Hope as the Tantive V4 is pulled into the hangar of the Devastator. That motif was also expanded on in Empire Strikes Back as Vader's trap when it received a trill motion at the beginning of the motif and given a parallel second phrase that continues upward. I've been thinking about it, and from a certain point of view, it makes sense not to have the Imperial March in this series. Prequels aside, the theme didn't technically exist yet. Remember, Williams didn't write the now famous Imperial March until Empire Strikes Back, so Holt is utilizing the theme from the movie that this show is actually leading towards. She said as much in a recent interview, speaking about the use of the John Williams theme. And the music beautifully reflects one of the saddest moments so far as Tala sacrifices herself to save Kenobi and the others. And at first, as Vader walked through the hallway, I was again disappointed by the lack of theme for him. But then I noticed the ostinato, or repeating rhythmic pattern, and underneath was the rhythm of the Imperial March. But personally, the fight between Vader and Reva after this was musically disappointing. It personally felt like typically music for a video game cue. It often riffs on the same basic chord progression, allowing it to loop simplistically. And I think this, to me, is Holt's biggest weakness. She doesn't have a style that can imitate the chromatic romantic era harmonies that seems to constantly move to new places, challenging the listener's perception and continually pushing forward the same way that Williams can. She's trying to imitate other films of this era instead of trying to imitate opera from 150 years ago. The music relies on repetitive syncopated ostinatos as its only backbone of tension and energy. The result is music that doesn't feel as dramatic because it doesn't push forward harmonically. Is it epic thanks to the production? Yes, but it is not harmonically compelling, and it took me until this scene to really understand that. As the Grand Inquisitor enters, we hear an augmented version of the second phrase to the Inquisitor theme, reflecting that he is bigger than Reva ever could have been. She was never going to be able to take up that position from him. In the interview I mentioned earlier, Holt referred to the Kenobi score as planting seeds, but that would suggest that from those seeds, things are growing. That we're getting more and more of a transition to the themes and sound of A New Hope. But instead, this episode pulled back on that. After hearing the subtle hints that I referenced in my Part 3 and Part 4 breakdowns, this episode had far fewer hints while having plenty of opportunities. I've been pretty supportive of the score so far, but this didn't feel like a step forward for me if that is in fact the intended goal. With that said though, I do believe that we are going to get some serious legacy theme moments in next week's episode, unless they decide to save that for the apparent second season. But what do you all think? Did I miss themes in this one that you caught? And tell me what you thought of this episode. Did you like the music? I'll be on vacation next week, but I'll try to schedule a few of the planet themes to delay until I can make a breakdown for the finale. And before you go, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to learn more about the music of the galaxy far, far away. And as always, may the be with you.